Happy New Year. It's officially 2024 and this is my first video of the year. Now today's video is going to be a little bit of an exploration, experimentation with two art supplies that I'm not quite intimately familiar with. So one is a returning product and the other is brand new, but they are supposed to be used in tandem, so we're gonna see how they work together. You may remember my Chinese painting pigment video where I tested out these Chinese painting pigments that I was gifted, and I had a little bit of reservation with those because they are not something that I'm used to. I thought that they would be exactly like watercolor, but they ended up being a little bit trickier. I think it's due to the fact that there is a heavy amount of mica in the paint and that perhaps the painting particles themselves are just not as large or maybe larger than watercolor pigment particles. Either way, they do not perform the exact same way as watercolor and they're a little bit tricky to use. However, I discovered after some research that they're actually meant to be used with rice paper, which I did not have at the time, but from the same person who gifted me the pigments, I was also gifted a sizable stack of rice paper with which I could experiment on. And so today I'm going to be experimenting with those pigments and the rice paper, and I'm going to see if using the correct canvas for the medium will improve my experience at all. So this painting is going to be based on the Chinese zodiac Year of the Dragon. So if you aren't super familiar with what the Chinese zodiac is, it's essentially the ancient traditional practice of assigning a zodiac animal to each year in a 12-year cycle of the Chinese calendar. So this year is the Year of the Dragon, and each animal has its own attributes, and I'll tell you a little bit later about what the attributes of the dragon are. So we're gonna get started. I have my rice paper, I have my Chinese painting pigments, I have my hands, so let's get started.
So if you have not seen the aforementioned painting video with these Chinese pigments, here they are. Now, these might look sort of like watercolor pans, but they don't really perform like watercolor. The pigment is a little bit grainier, it's a little bit harder to pick up, and you have to be very strategic when you're painting with these. So let's go ahead and open the rice paper that I was gifted. I want to try the pigments out on it and see how they perform on their intended surface. This rice paper has two different sides to it. One is pretty smooth and the other has a little bit of grip to it, a rough texture, I suppose, so that your paint or ink or whatever it is that you're using will adhere better. As you see, it says toothy surface and smooth surface. It's incredibly thin and quite transparent, as you can see. It's giving fancy, but in a way that's maybe not meant for amateurs like me. Anywho, let's get painting. I've selected this brush because it looks really similar to those fancy watercolor and calligraphy brushes that I see people using. I don't have any of those, so I'm just working with what I have as usual. Just gonna start out by testing some of these on the paper so that I can get a feel for how they work and what they look like. Right away, I could tell that the rice paper was soaking up a ton of water, and in fact, it went clean through with the smallest amount of water that I thought I could possibly put on a brush. So with the second color, I tried to work in a little bit less water, but as you can see, I totally failed. This made the medium a little bit more intimidating to me because I got the idea that if I was going to make a mistake on this, it was probably going to be a pretty big mistake, with it being so touchy. So I went in with a few more colors. I kept adjusting the amount of water that I was using, which is a little bit difficult with the pigments because they themselves soak up water really quickly. So if you don't get that pigment picked up immediately, it pretty much just dries back down. I was not feeling very hopeful at this point. As you can see, the colors here, they're paying off better on my mixed media paper, and that was a little bit concerning to me. However, I already committed to this project, so it was gonna happen no matter what. I then got the idea to use just plain watercolor with the rice paper, and again, I played around with the amount of water that I was using, and it really seemed to react well with the rice paper. Of course, it was still, soaking the paper clean through, as you'll see on my desk later on in this video. But overall, after playing around, I found that I could still get a decent color payoff if I just used as little water as possible. So with that being the case, I then moved on to the next phase of this project, which was sketching out my dragon. And it was here that I discovered that I don't even know what a dragon looks like, and I especially don't know the anatomy of a dragon. I did not even know what I wanted this dragon to look like. I somewhere around here decided apparently that it was gonna look like a dog, as you'll see me frantically writing here. Dragon or dog? The world may never know. I was having a bit of a difficult time with the appendages, and I erased and restarted this sketch numerous times. I finally landed on a body shape that I was okay with, so I transferred that to my iPad and I modified it a bit more before I then printed it out directly onto the rice paper. That way, in case I made any mistakes, I could simply print out as many copies as I needed. And here is my finished sketch. I decided that I wanted to go in first with some watercolor, and then I would do the pigments on top of the watercolor. I figured that this would get me the greatest amount of clarity with the pigments. So let's talk words associated with the Year of the Dragon. Typically, the Year of the Dragon is associated with strength and power. People who are born during the Year of the Dragon are said to contain natural luck. They're generally intelligent, confident, and charismatic individuals. To all you Year of the Dragon folks, it must be nice. I'm a chicken. For the time being, as usual, I will allow my disembodied voice to simply float away as you hopefully stick around to watch me finish painting this doggone dragon. Dun 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 dun. Now for my favorite part, which is overlaying the base colors with the Chinese pigments. And I chose some sort of corresponding colors that I thought would look really good over the initial color that I laid down. Jump scare! Yeah, I was really excited with how that turned out, so that was the reason behind that face.
product. I'm gonna be honest, it's not my favorite thing that I've done. There were some spots that I messed up because I was being impatient, and I'm really just, you know, underwhelmed by the entire project. However, it was a learning process, and I really feel like I got a good chunk of knowledge, and I now know what painting on rice paper is like. I learned that rice paper takes a lot of patience to work with, that I should probably have something behind it when I paint with it, because it does tend to immediately soak up the water, and everything you paint soaks through, which makes it a little bit difficult to work with. You definitely need to be waiting for these things to dry before you move on to other layers. And even when I tried to iron out the paper to smooth the wrinkles, it still looked pretty crinkly. So I'm not really sure how to paint with it and end up with a smooth surface. I'm assuming it probably has something to do with how much water you use and how much time you give it, or perhaps even just using a thicker sheet or more high quality sheet of rice paper. But yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that you learned something too, and I'll see you in the next one. Now, I will say that, no, I will not say, because I don't know what I'm saying.
Seriously.
So, if you aren't super familiar